Okay, so take a look at this. At first glance, you might just see a vintage warplane. And sure, this is the P-47 Thunderbolt, a 17,000-pound flying sledgehammer from World War II. But what if I told you this isn't just a piece of history? What if this plane is actually a blueprint? I'm talking about a whole design philosophy, a way of thinking that didn't just win a war, it secretly shaped the entire world that you're living in right now.
So that's the big question I want you to keep in the back of your mind as we go through this together. Are we just having a fun little history lesson about an old airplane? Or are we actually about to uncover the origin story of modern power itself? The exact moment when overwhelming production became the ultimate weapon.
All right, here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we'll look at its shaky start with the first victory. Then we get to the real heart of it, the clash of philosophies. After that, get ready, because we're going to dig into the math of a new war, and the numbers here are just staggering. And finally, we'll bring it all home and see its lasting legacy, and why all of this still really matters today. Okay, let's dive right in. Our story starts high in the skies over France in 1943. The Allies are rolling out a brand new fighter, and you'd think they'd be excited, right? Well, not so much. To be honest, nobody was impressed. They saw this thing as a clumsy, overweight giant, a sledgehammer in a world that was used to elegant, nimble fencing foils. Yeah, its debut was, well, it was a total disaster. The very first mission on March 10th got scrubbed because the radios didn't even work. And the pilots? Oh man, they hated it. I mean, a lot of these guys were aces, used to flying the British Spitfire, which was like a nimble little sports car. And now they're being forced to fly this P-47, which felt more like a freight train. They really thought it was a joke, a clumsy failure, and that's what everyone believed, right up until April 15th, when one single dogfight changed absolutely everything.
And you can't really blame them for being skeptical. I mean, their nickname for it was the 7-ton milk bottle. Seriously, this plane was an absolute monster. It weighed more than two of its main German opponents, the Messerschmitt Bf-109s, put together. Just imagine that. To the German engineers, who were obsessed with precision and saving every single gram of weight, this American approach wasn't just different, it was completely absurd. It made no sense at all to them.
And then came the moment of truth. Major Blakesley is up at 20,000 feet. He gets a German Focke-Wulf 190 in his sights. He holds down the trigger, and all hell breaks loose. 8 50 caliber machine guns just erupt with a literal storm of steel. And the German plane? It doesn't just get shot down. It doesn't fall from the sky. It disintegrates. It just comes apart in midair. You see, this wasn't just a kill. This was a statement. A brutal, loud announcement that a whole new kind of war had just arrived.
And that moment, that single moment of annihilation, that's what reveals the real story here. Because this was never just a battle between two airplanes. No, this was a clash between two completely different philosophies of warfare. You could call it the martial artist versus the brawler.
So let's break that down. On one side, you've got the German doctrine, the martial artist. This is all about precision, elegance, skill. Their fighters, like the FW-190 and Bf-109, were lightweight, incredibly agile. Their pilots were trained to be expert marksmen, to make every single shot count, because ammunition was precious. It was an artisanal approach to war. But on the other side, the American doctrine, the brawler. This wasn't a duel, it was a bar fight. The philosophy was simple. Build a heavy, tough-as-nails weapons platform, stuff it with an absolutely obscene amount of firepower, and just overwhelm your enemy with sheer, brute force. It wasn't art, it was an industrial process. You know who summed it up perfectly? The top P-47 ace, a guy named Gabby Gabreski. He said, and I quote, "We didn't need to be better shots. We needed to put our sight on them and hold the trigger down. 850s did the rest." I mean, that's it, right there. That quote is the whole philosophy in a nutshell. The goal wasn't to outfly the other guy. The goal was to create a kill zone so dense with lead that precision aiming became almost secondary. You just had to point the plane in the right direction and let the firepower do the work.
Now just try to put yourself in the other cockpit for a second. Imagine you're a German pilot. Every fifth round fired at you is a tracer, a glowing bullet. So you don't see individual shots whizzing by. No, you see what one of them later described as streams of tracers that seemed solid, a literal wall of fire coming right for you. It wasn't just that it was physically deadly, it was the psychological shock of it. It was absolutely devastating.
Okay, so this brawler philosophy of just overwhelming the enemy sounds great, but it only works if you can feed the beast. And this is where the story shifts from the skies to the spreadsheets, and the math behind this new kind of war becomes truly mind-boggling. This is where you realize the war wasn't just won by pilots. It was won by factory workers and logistics.
Just look at this number for a moment. 336,000. Let that sink in. What is that? That's the approximate number of .50 caliber rounds that P-47s were firing on an average day in the middle of 1943. That's not in some massive battle, that's not over a month or a week, that's in one single day.
So, how big is that number really? Well, let's put it into perspective. The ammunition fired by American P-47s in a single day was more than the entire German fighter force in all of France received in a full week. Let me say that again. 1 day's worth of bullets for the P-47s was more than a 7-day supply for their enemy. This wasn't a fair fight. It was logistical annihilation.
So you're probably asking, how is that even possible? Well, it was possible because of places like the Lake City ammo plant in Missouri. Get this, one American factory produced 1.6 billion rounds a year. That single factory produced more small arms ammunition than all of Germany's factories combined. Just think about the sheer scale of that. It wasn't one nation's industry versus another's. It was one factory against an entire country's war effort.
And this advantage went way deeper than just raw numbers. It was baked into the philosophy of maintenance itself. In the American system, every single part was interchangeable. A ground crew could swap out a P-47's massive engine overnight and have it back in the fight. In the German system, it was still that older craft-based approach. Parts weren't standardized, a damaged plane often wasn't repaired, it was just cannibalized for parts. One system was designed for efficiency at scale, the other was an artisanal approach that simply couldn't compete.
So, okay, fascinating history, but why does any of this matter to you today? Well, here's the kicker. The blueprint that was perfected for the P-47, this philosophy of overwhelming industrial power, it didn't just disappear when the war ended. It went on to build the modern world. Think about it. Militarily, the idea of overwhelming force became American doctrine for decades. Just look at the A-10 Warthog, a plane that is essentially a flying cannon. It is the P-47's direct spiritual descendant. But just as importantly, when the war ended, that immense industrial machine of mass production didn't just shut down, it was turned inward, and it started turning out cars, refrigerators, and televisions, creating the massive consumer boom in the 1950s that shaped modern life.
And we have to remember, the P-47 wasn't just a dogfighter, it evolved into a terrifyingly effective ground attack weapon. When you look at its record, you see it wasn't just fighting a war, it was systematically dismantling an entire country's ability to function. It destroyed 9,000 locomotives, 86,000 railway cars, tens of thousands of vehicles. This was an instrument of total industrial warfare.
And this entire industrial machine was powered by a deep human system. The factories were staffed by a new workforce. At the Republic plant, 40% of the workers were women. At those ammo plants, women dominated quality control, ensuring every single one of those millions of rounds would fire perfectly. And this depth extended to the pilots themselves. An American pilot went into combat with over 400 hours of training. By the late war, their German counterpart had barely 110. It was never just about having more planes, it was about having more and better trained pilots to fly them.
So, when you boil it all down, here's the ultimate takeaway. Germany wasn't defeated by a better plane or a more skilled pilot. The Focke-Wulf was an incredible aircraft. No, they were defeated by a better system. They were drowned in a tidal wave of mass-produced steel, aluminum, and brass that they simply could not match.
Which leaves us with one crucial final question. The blueprint we've uncovered, this direct line between industrial capacity and national power, is still the defining formula of our world. So, as you look around today, in an age where power is still linked directly to industrial, technological, and economic might, you have to ask yourself, who is building the P-47s of tomorrow?